Hi, hello neighbor. This is your host Haiti Panamino with Social Practices in the House of Wisdom. Today our special guest is Rene Michalak. Did I say that right?
Yep.
And he is one of the supporters and I guess the long-term member of Rethink Red Deer. And I will let him explain to you what Rethink Red Deer is all about. Rene, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Haiti. So it's good to be here. I'm excited to talk with you about Rethink and how it's evolved over the years, but basically it was a grassroots effort from a longtime Red Deerian named Lauren Daniel, who's now retired out to Vancouver Island and enjoying the sweet life out there. We're slaving away back here in the salt mines and fighting the good fight with Rethink Red Deer, and his grassroots effort of raising awareness about pedestrian accessibility in Red Deer grew into a nonprofit organization that broadened the topic into sustainability and to start a conversation around what that means, but more importantly what it looks like in practice, so that people understand that it really starts at your back door. It's not just something that's online or in a book somewhere, that's something you practice and live every day. And I think it's really about being mindful about your connection with the earth, but also with each other, because we really kind of take for granted every day that we have this beautiful thing called a planet that nurtures us and keeps us alive, and the sun shines every day. And the more mindful we are of that, I think the more good quality of life we can experience. And I think coming together with that awareness and having lots of cool and fun events really makes it something that people want to be a part of. So it's grown over the years to involve different organizations and collaborations with the city and Red Deer College, now Red Deer Polytechnic, and many other nonprofit organizations that we've had the blessing to be able to work with, and create some really cool physical project sites where people can come to and see what that sustainable living looks like in practice. And then hopefully be inspired to take some of those ideas back home and make some mistakes and come back and learn and share some stories. And we help each other along the way and just make quality of life better. That's really kind of our vision, is improving the long-term quality of life in Red Deer and area, and doing it by these hands-on opportunities. So in a nutshell, that's basically what it is.
Right. So what kind of opportunities are you talking about? Like, what does it look like to be part of Rethink Red Deer?
So when you look at sustainability, it's really kind of about the economy, social aspects, the environment, and how those things all kind of work together in an integrated way. We're really educated to kind of learn about things and become specialists in our own field, get a career, get a job, and do that until you retire. But as society evolves, we're finding we're getting more and more opportunities for different paths in our work lives. And for me, it was personally making the decision that I could work a job that I could stand until I retire at whatever age that might be nowadays, or I could retire now and do what I would do if I was retired. And so that's kind of given me passion and energy to work with other people on a common vision of that, a community living sustainably. And so it's kind of a choose your own adventure opportunity for people. It's understand what sustainability is, start to become aware of our connections that we rely on with the sun and the rain, and where food comes from and all those things, how we produce waste and where it ends up. Because we throw things away as if it's some magical place where we can just conveniently, forget about things, but it's all still connected. We're not, severing our ties with the very things we rely on. So, Garbage-Free February is one example, I think, of a project that people could start with, and it's basically kind of a reflective opportunity to spend the month of February being aware of how much garbage you're producing, and if you can, put it in a bag or a container somewhere for that month, by the end of the month, you kind of get a visual representation of what kind of waste you produced. And then if you want to, try it again the next year and start, implementing ways to reduce that volume, right? And the journey, I think, is really the value, not so much how you produce or how much you reduce, but just becoming aware of how we create waste, but also finding out opportunities how to not produce that waste. And it just has so many ripple effects in your own life and your opportunity to have stories to share with others and their stories with you. And I think that's really what's valuable in living together in a community. So it's just kind of that choose your own adventure dynamic where, bring an interest to the organization that has some connection to sustainability or the environment, and then brainstorm it with the other people that are involved at any given point in time of the organization's history. And we'd like to keep a good network of people to, draw on or return to and check in with and say, how you doing? What have you been up to? And that's kind of, I think, where our Eco Living Fair comes in the spring. So we I refer to it as a family reunion without the fighting. So we kind of come together and learn about new things, get an introduction to new topics, but also kind of like catch up and say what you've been up to, what do you need. We usually have a marketplace of exhibitors there from different businesses and nonprofits and groups that you probably wouldn't have known about had you not come to the event. So it's those kinds of things, personal challenges, gatherings, and now physical spaces. By being consistent in what we do and having an impact on people's lives, I think those bigger institutions see the value in this type of work, and they may not have the mandate to do it. And so this kind of gives us a niche to fill or to take advantage of and do a lot of this community building work that there aren't necessarily environmental organizations that have that flexibility to do it. So in some ways it's really great, it's liberating because we have the flexibility to do kind of where go and do whatever we want to do, but then we're also subject to whatever funding or resources might happen to be available at the time. So it's a bit of a catch-22 that way. Is you want to do some things, but if there's no resources to do it, you kind of have to go where the money is. So it's almost like foraging in the forest. You may want bananas, but if there's no bananas in season, or where you live, then you have to kind of eat what's available, right?
Right.
So it's like being present all the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So going back to the way that Rethink has become more of a education, a member of a community that sponsors different groups to come in and be a part of a space where they can learn and educate and bring their own teachings. Would you be able to describe what that looks like to me?
Yeah, I think that the Eco Living Fair was probably the greatest example of that, historically speaking, for the organization. So I think it was 2011 where we learned of the event in Calgary, and their organization was called Eco Living Events Calgary. And so they had a part of their goal was to do outreach and visit other communities and say, is this something you're interested in doing? And so we jumped on the opportunity, and the format of that one-day event is to have hourly workshops where people pay $5 just to, contribute and help fundraise for the organization hosting the event. But then people from all walks of life, if they have something environmental related that they're into, or they can teach a skill, that's really kind of the ideal situation. Is you get a 45-minute crash course, usually with hands-on components, so you build something and take it home. And then, it's an inspiring experience for people to kind of get introduced to a topic. And now, of course, with the internet, the world's your oyster. You basically hop online and start, looking into what it is you got introduced to. And hopefully it, helps people geek out and be part of that creative energy that I think we all, really thirst for and thrive to be part of, but don't necessarily get the opportunity all the time. So that event went year over year, pretty much every year until COVID, and then all of our public gatherings stopped. So since then, we kind of relied on the internet to try and engage people through social media, but it's really not the same. You really have to get together with people. And I think as the fair continued, we made those connections we needed to make the case for some physical spaces for project sites, and we teamed up with the Red River Naturalists and found an opportunity making lemonade out of lemons, basically, that the city of Red Deer ended up with a fine levied by Environment Canada for a PCB spill in the river. So we were able to turn that penalty of $50,000 through the Environmental Damages Fund of the federal government, which basically laid the penalty on them to start the Piper Creek Restoration Agriculture Project. So the city had already started a community garden there in 2009, and it was about 2014 that we found this opportunity to put forward a 5-year vision of restoring degraded farmland into community garden space and really trying to show people, take those ideas you learned at the Eco Living Fair and now come be part of a community garden space that goes from just a regular annual garden to a perennial, year-round type of growing space, so we can count on food to come back without us having to put in all this extra work in order to get it started, right? And then the ideas of zero waste, composting, soil building, seed saving, it's just everything starts tying in together and amplifies itself. And I think with that fair being the spring kind of motivator and inspiring point leads us into the growing season at Piper Creek. And we were able to repair the creek that had a non-conforming crossing in it, so now the fish can be more healthy. The beavers have returned and really re-flooded the landscape, so that's really amazing to see. And just showing people that nature is your mentor. If you let it, if you slow down long enough to observe what's going on, you learn so many things. So it's taking it from, I think, online to, on the ground, basically, and helping people make that jump or that evolution from disconnection to connection with the natural world, with each other. So that's, I think, where we've had our success. And then naturally a physical space as big as these project sites are that we're currently managing needs labor to keep it in shape. And volunteers are great as long as they show up. Right. But we're experiencing far more episodic volunteering than we are, long-term commitment to causes. So I think we can offer both with these project spaces, especially with seasonality, and kind of reintroducing people to the joy of seasonality, that you look forward to different things at different times of the year. Right? So that's, I think, where a lot of that education's coming in, is just bringing people together, giving them a bit of, inspiration, and then setting them loose on a space where they can make mistakes and not worry about it as being their own property and they had to pour a bunch of money into it, right? So the grants that we get, the support that we get, gives us the ability to create these experiences for people that they can then feel empowered to take it back home and apply at their back door. As I said, where sustainability ultimately starts at your back door.
So you're teaching them gardening, you're teaching them different skills on composting and... Yeah,
skills that we don't really have anymore because we have grocery stores, we have landfills, we have, water going down the pipe and not worrying that it needs to be in any sort of condition, right? We have wastewater treatment plants. So it's almost as if our affluence has made us disconnected, right? All these conveniences we have kind of insulated us from harm, but also from all the benefits of going through trials and challenges and struggles. So I think that's a big part of the educational experiences that we offer, is kind of safely reintroducing people to sensation that they wouldn't necessarily get anymore if they just stayed home or went to work and came home or did their usual distractions, right? So it's not new, but it's unique, I think, is the way to talk about it.
Right, so Rethink is trying to reinstill practices that have been sort of pushed aside or forgotten just because we have conveniences that are now taking over the mind space where we were previously thinking for ourselves and saying, how can I make this better? How can I create my own food? How can I grow and sustain my family, myself, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I think it's been more of a stuck in convenience and not realizing that the generations before us had to put a lot of work in to get us to this level of convenience and affluence. And only until it starts to degrade again and people suffer and struggle do they kind of, reawaken to what normalcy is. So we're living in a really unnormal time, I think, and it's for good and for bad, right?
Right. So what would you suggest for, let's say, a community member who says, oh, I'd like to get into the garden or something like that, but I just don't know where to start?
Start inside. Take a cup, put some soil in it, and put a dry pea seed. Just start growing something, anything. Take care of something. I think that's a big part of it. We don't take care of things really anymore. we're living more in a disposable economy where we just have single-use plastics and things like that. So there's no real motivation or even opportunity to take care of something. I grew up without pets, and until I had a pet, I didn't realize, the value of that experience, right? Taking care of something. So I think that's where it's at, is just, find something you care about and learn more about it, and then share it with others.
Right. Now, Rethink is actually quite involved in the community. And how young do you start the process for people to learn?
All ages, yeah. Usually if you can stand, you can do something.
Right. So who are some of the people that you've worked with that you could say, hey, we started with this age group?
I think one of the real great ones was the Little Green Thumbs program when it was still in operation. It was funded through the conglomerate, if that's the right word to use, consortium of partners, maybe that's the better way to say it. So kind of like the industry partners all pitched in some funds. And then Ag for Life was like the nonprofit tasked with using those funds to have this in-class growing curriculum. So basically the classrooms participating, or the schools participating in this Little Green Thumbs program, would get set up with grow kits, grow lights, worm bin for composting. And then they basically tied it into the science curriculum about where food comes from. So that was grades, I think, 1 through 9, I think was the target. And at the peak, we had about 24 schools participating in central Alberta. I think the economy took a turn and the funders shifted priority. And then, so the funding dried up and we weren't able to continue. But these classrooms got to keep the equipment. So we're hoping that the teachers would continue to, use those things as demonstrations for the kids and really reinforce the learning in the science curriculum.
I'd like to go back to the topic of funding for a minute, just because I know that Rethink does a lot of work with community groups.
Yeah.
And they have really found a value in the space that Rethink has been able to secure for them, even though the space might be temporary. So what does it look like, let's say, on a year-to-year funding for an organization like yours?
It's 99% project-based. So depending on the case you can make for the duration of the funding, that's all we can really rely on. It's really challenging to do this work when there's not necessarily enough to go around and so many needs out there. Lots of other nonprofit organizations that are providing essential or critical services. We're looking at things in the long term, not necessarily on the immediate need, although it's still relevant, but I think there's a lot more organizations doing great work out there that are addressing the immediate needs. But I think a lot of those immediate needs come from not having a long enough view as to what we're trying to do together. And so that's where a lot of those immediate problems arise, is the resilience isn't there that maybe used to be. I think we've got too many eggs in one basket in terms of the way that we live, that we can't really weather the storm of the incidentals that come our way. So for duration of funding, it's, again, like I said, with the 5-year funding we had for Pipe Creek or the 3-year funding we had for Common Ground, if we're not immediately, after getting those funds, lining up the next intake or harvest of money, then we find ourselves in a situation where all that inflation now deflates and people kind of have to go their separate ways unless they have the time and energy to stay involved as a volunteer. But the way the economy's going with expenses and inflation and things, it's just getting harder and harder to pay those bills and to, stay healthy and take care of the things that need immediate attention, right? So I think that's where a lot of our new work with our Indigenous communities is helping to introduce people to, the historical, cultural context of sustainability, that Indigenous communities live the longest on the land and know how to relate to the land in ways that can help those that don't have those relationships really cope better or thrive better. Because I like to use the analogy of a conveyor belt of pies. We talk about getting our piece of the pie, and if we're all fighting over that one pie, that one piece, we don't realize that behind us there's a conveyor belt of pies going by, and all we have to do is just kind of break our focus on that fight over that piece of pie and realize that there's endless pies over there and there's different flavors of pies. And it's like, if we can subscribe to different ways of living or different ways of doing things, then the abundance just appears in front of us.
Right, and I think that's what social practices aims to do, is to try to help people think of different ways that they can utilize the resources that are available to them. But it's just been challenging because people don't know what those resources are, because they're trapped inside this box, that they just don't look outside and think, oh, how can I access this resource for this type of work that I'm trying to do. So with Rethink being such a pioneer in our community, I'm curious as to what other projects are you involved in? Like, what are your major projects right now?
Piper Creek is still ongoing, but kind of coming to the end of its current round of funding. And I mentioned Common Ground. Very similar, but a little more urban in the sense of location. So right in the heart of downtown Red Deer and on a brownfield site. So makes all that we do there twice as hard, because everything has to be above ground for a risk of contaminated soil. But same kind of idea. It's a little more annual gardening there, but really helping to enliven, I think, the capstone space into what it has the potential to become. So we're working there with schools on, taking them out of the classroom down into the actual open space, into the sunshine, and getting their hands in the soil, and really, taking that Little Green Thumbs experience into now I would call Big Green Thumbs. They're, leaving the desk, leaving the classroom, and being outside in the open environment. And we're really hoping to bring a lot of those classes and students out to the Piper Creek site too. It's just a bit more remote on the south end of Red Deer. So those two sites are great and dynamic, working in kind of opposite of each other, one in the downtown, one at the peri-urban edge. And then our Eco-Living Fair kind of is coming out of hibernation and kind of collaborating with the Fall Energy Innovation Fair, which grew out of the Renewable Energy Fair, again, before COVID. So COVID was really that stopping point for us to maybe take a break or a breath and assess, what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to let those old projects go, because they've got so much enduring quality to them and people involved in it. So mm-hmm. we're kind of figuring out, the best mix right now. But between those events and the physical project spaces, that's really kind of the heart of what we're doing right now.
So who are the organizations that you collaborate with at the moment?
So many. We've worked most recently with the Young Agrarians organization and creating internships and apprenticeships for youth. And that's where that labor comes in to help at the project sites. The city of Red Deer has been a huge help in terms of collaborating with the different local grant funds that they have, and the space at Common Ground and Piper Creek being, already programmed through the Parks Department and Economic Development. So really, working in a collaborative way there with those departments through the city. Red Deer Polytechnic, now, formerly Red Deer College, has a Green Campus initiative, and so we've been, regularly hosting the Eco-Living Fair there and now the Energy Fair. So those are the big industry or institutional partners. And then lots of funders over the years, all three levels of government essentially. The environmental nonprofit organizations would include Trout Unlimited, the Agroforestry Woodlot Extension Society, Cows and Fish, or the Alberta Riparian Habitat Management Association. Those are the ones that stand out the most off the top of my head, and there's probably a good couple dozen that we've been working with. And then local businesses like Living Lands Landscape and Design, really helping us with the concept plans for the spaces that we're creating at Piper Creek and Common Ground. And it's just a timber framing company. Top Peg Timber Frame Construction helped us rebuild the barn at Piper Creek. And I think, those were some of the best stories, the relationships we built there, the training, just, the participants in that training were able to actually contribute to the construction of that barn. So it's not just a course and you take nothing home except your knowledge, but you actually contributed to building something that's now a community asset. Right.
And you're also working with Indigenous communities and local nonprofits.
Yeah, more recently now with our Indigenous communities, urban Aboriginal voices, and helping to introduce people to traditional knowledge they wouldn't normally have the opportunity to experience, and kind of do what I'm referring to as active reconciliation, so taking it beyond a conversation into, actual, like we've always done, relationship building, but a little more purpose now with the federal mandate and the 93 steps, I think, or 93 areas for action, helping to get more of those addressed and get people acting on, right?
So Rethink Red Deer right now, what are its major needs?
Just the operating funding, I think. You can't grow an organization with staff without having that dedicated revenue. And our marketplace in general isn't exactly green. So there's not a lot of products we can sell that are high demand that people would want, that we can count on as, perpetual income. So I think the big challenge is creating that revenue stream to be able to grow a staff that you can count on and take on more project sites. That's the thing is, we're stretched to the limit now with the resources we have, and it's very, again, project based. So challenge there is when a project funding source goes through its duration, a lot of the requirements is that if you want to receive funding again, we can't fund the same project or the same activities. So it's always kind of like, okay, well, what do we have to do new in order to qualify, right? So there's a lot of hoops to jump through. And it's pretty stressful because you always have to be mindful of, where's the next injection of funding coming from. And if you're giving people jobs that they rely on to pay their mortgage and bills, well, they need to be clearly understanding that this is only for a specific period of time, right?
Yeah.
And then it really affects, I think, the commitment or the investment that people want to make with their own energy if they know that, well, I'm only here for a couple of years.
Right.
And I think that's the limiting factor, as I was alluding to earlier, that we're so short-sighted in our focus of our relationships with each other, with the natural world. We don't look long enough term because there's no incentive to look long term.
Right. So when you're talking about relationships, one of the things I wanted to touch on was the fact that with our community, the way that we are a little out of touch with each other. And projects like gardening and getting in, a community setting where you're sharing food and you're sharing music and you're sharing your stories is quite healing for a community. So is that one of the things that you would say Rethink has as a focus is not necessarily just healing the environment and healing the land, which is what its focus is on, getting people to grow, but would you say that it also is for healing a community?
It's a big goal, especially as the community grows. The challenge, I think, in having a goal that grand is being involved enough to know what the issues are and where to put resources and people without harming relationships. Everything seems to be an improv act in life in general. So I think that's the biggest challenge is you almost have to be retired or that age in order to know enough of a place in order to be able to make decisions that are going to be impactful. And if you haven't lived somewhere long enough, how would you ever know effectively how to be helpful, right? In the longer impact, not just immediate Band-Aid solution, but let's get to the root of the problem, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So if people want to get involved with Rethink, where can they go?
Well, show up at the project sites. That's probably the best way. It's just hard to maintain these sites and keep constant tabs on email and social media. So that in itself can create challenges. If people don't feel like they're getting an immediate response, then they may not keep interest long enough. Again, it's that kind of short-term, instant gratification type of culture that we live in. So I think it's just, sign up for social media, bookmark the websites and the calendar of events, and just show up for stuff. It's like showing up without an agenda, without expectations, and just meet people and, check things out, right? So it's almost like shopping. You just go and check things out. If you do it with an empty wallet, it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
There's not that extra pressure, but then, or do you get to leave with something, right? And that's, I think, where, having that sample engagement and us being open to the general public. There isn't any membership requirement or restrictions to participation. It's just show up, experience something, be part of a conversation, introduce yourself, just flex your social skills and develop them as you go along. I think that's really what it's about. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. I really feel like I've left with something, because I feel like there's a responsibility for our community to get involved, and for people to just kind of open up their eyes and go, okay, well, what am I doing with myself, and how am I creating sustainability for my future, my family, and that kind of stuff. So so I really enjoyed having you on the show today, and we'll definitely put your links up so that people will find you and know where to get in contact with you.
Awesome.
Thanks
Appreciate
again.
the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you.